Week 17 of the fantasy football season. And if you made it to your championship, congratulations. But here's a few running backs I will bench this weekend. Time of recording this video, none of these backs have been placed on the protocol list as of now. The first guy, Josh Jacobs, Raiders. So Josh Jacobs, it's been a decent fantasy season, and he's been a nice number 2 running back for fantasy owners this season. But right here, tough matchup at the Colts that give up the 4th least amount of fantasy points to running backs on the season. So the last few games here for Jacobs, not eye-popping numbers. Week 14 at Kansas City, 24 rushing yards, 5 catches, 46 yards, a fumble loss. Week 15 at the Browns, 15 carries, 52 yards, 3 catches, 42 yards. And Week 16 had a monster workload, 27 carries, 129 rush yards, 1 catch, -5 yards, and a fumble loss. So right here, tough matchup at Indianapolis. And right here, this Raider team, their offense is totally different on the road than it is at home this season. So right here, that don't favor Jacobs. It's a road game. And with a tough matchup versus Indianapolis, I won't have high hopes for Jacobs here. Maybe 10 to 12 fantasy points. And he's a running back I will bench this week if I have better options. The next running back is Cordell Patterson of the Atlanta Falcons. So Patterson, he was having a great season, but the last few weeks here, he's fizzled out big time. Week 14 at Carolina, 16 carries, 58 yards, a touchdown, 2 catches, 1 yard. Week 15 at San Francisco, 11 carries, 18 yards only, 2 catches, 5 yards. And Week 16 versus Detroit, 7 carries, 14 yards, a touchdown, which saved his day, and 1 catch for a -1 yard. So right here, tough matchup at Buffalo that gives up the 10th least amount of fantasy points to running backs on the season. And over the last few weeks here, where he's had pretty plus matchups, he just hasn't delivered, is Patterson. And right now, in a championship ball game, it's going to be tough to trust him. And right now, I would bench him this week here because this offense in Atlanta hasn't been good pretty much the whole season. And with a tough matchup versus the Buffalo Bills, it's going to be tough for them to get things going. And they're going to be one-dimensional as well if they're going to be trailing early by a few scores in this one. The next running back I would bench is Dari, Ugga, Ballet of the Jacksonville Jaguars. So Ugga, Ballet, one of the best pickups this week here, added in 27% of fantasy leagues. So we know James Robinson's out for the season, obviously, with the torn Achilles. And the last few weeks here for Ugga, Ballet, Week 14 at Tennessee, 2 catches, 5 yards. Week 15 versus Houston, 1 rush yard, a catch, 5 yards. And then last week filling in the second quarter on for Robinson, 17 carries, 57 yards, a touchdown, and 2 catches, 15 yards. But this week here, it's going to be very tough sledding for this Jacksonville running game and Ugga, Ballet at the New England Patriots. The Patriots, we know they got a good track record of holding running backs down pretty well here. I think this Jacksonville offense could possibly get shut out as well. And I don't think Ugga, Ballet's that great of a receiver out of the backfield. And now it's a recipe for disaster. Last week was a way easier matchup versus a weak New York Jet defense. Anyway, Ugga, Ballet, he's going to start, but I just don't see him putting up numbers. And he's definitely a running back I can't trust in a championship game. The next running back's Devonta Freeman of the Baltimore Ravens. So the Ravens, very tough matchup this week here versus the Rams. And I know this team's been in a tailspin and Lamar should be back. But the last few weeks here, Freeman's been mediocre. Week 14 at Cleveland, 13 carries, 64 yards, 5 catches, 8 yards. Week 15 versus the Packers, he did nothing in that ball game. 6 carries, 22 yards, a catch for 2 yards. And Week 16 at Cincinnati, only 6 carries, 17 yards, a touchdown, and 2 catches for 3 yards. So him and Murray in that last game pretty much were a 50-50 split. So with a tough matchup this week versus the Rams, who are pretty stout versus the running game, and him splitting with Murray, there's no reason, in my opinion, to start Devonta Freeman unless you have no other options. And he's an easy running back to bench. And the 5th and final running back I will bench this week's Devonta Foreman of the Tennessee Titans. So a very tough matchup versus the Dolphins that give up the 3rd least amount of fantasy points to running backs on the season. And we saw on Monday Night Football in Week 16 them pretty much make Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram non-existent in that ball game. So the last few weeks here for Foreman, they've been pretty decent. Week 14 versus Jacksonville, 47 rush yards, a touchdown, 2 catches, 15 yards. Week 15 at Pittsburgh, 22 carries, 108 yards, 2 catches, 27 yards. And then last week, a touchdown saved his fantasy day. 9 carries, 17 yards, and a touchdown. So this week here with a tough matchup versus Miami and a bad ball game last week for Foreman, it's tough to trust him in a big spot this week, and I will bench him. So that's a few running backs I will bench here for Week 17 of the fantasy football season.